Good evening and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm Kevin Castley. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Tonight we're doing Hawk Talk, the interview series where I sit down with fellow interventionists and go over what kind of experiences and whatnot pilled them on national security, foreign policy, go over general sort of foreign policy views. And then at the end of the stream, we take questions and answers from the chat. So tonight we are going to be interviewing BeyLoien, and he's here right now. And with that, let's get into it. So welcome and thanks for coming on. And yeah, if you could just kind of tell the audience a bit about yourself and your sort of like political convictions, and then we can get into the specific sort of Hawk and national security stuff.
All right. Well, my name is BeyLoien, but you also can just call me Tristan. I'm a interventionist and a Christian survivalist from Ireland and the British Isles. Yeah, I just sort of, I'm a conservative follower of the monarch and hoping that farmers like me can, make it through hard times. But yeah, I don't really have much of a political, ideology. Anyways,
okay. What exactly then is Christian survivalism?
I am a Christian, and I do believe that there is a third war coming, and I believe that we should be prepared for it. So,
well, there you go. Yeah, for me, I'm agnostic basically, but I also recognize that there's a third world war coming, and that's one of the reasons why when I talk about economics and whatnot, I always try to emphasize that we should be self-sufficient in both essential manufacturing as well as heavy industry at large, because when that war does happen, you want to be able to flip the switch right away to start moving towards a wartime economy. You don't want to have your stuff in different territory, potentially enemy or adversary territory. Now, to kind of get into the foreign policy aspects and everything, what sort of experiences or reading or whatnot kind of drew you to become an interventionist, or were you always interventionistic?
I wasn't always interventionistic. I had a teen. I got into politics through my teenhood, and obviously I was a bit of a rebellious teen, as most are, so I was a left-leaning person, but I witnessed some things, riots and stuff in my country, and then I paid more attention to the news and the wars in the Middle East between the Kurds and ISIS. And so that sort of drew me to be an interventionist. And then, of course, I got into contact with the Hawks through Net 7, who looked at my stuff. So.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I think, I think that the community on Twitter is definitely something that has been much needed in recent years in terms of what I would call the era of cringe. I think that it's the sort of thing that by and large, it's kind of rare. The meme is that hawks are a rare bird. It's kind of rare to meet people that are just straight up like, yeah, no, I support interventionism. I support wars in this particular case or over there. That tends to spook a lot of people. That tends to make a lot of people uncomfortable. But they will simply just have this knee-jerk reaction of, but war is bad, while failing to recognize that there are far worse evils in the world than taking action to rid the world of those evils. And I think that that sense of a community online is definitely useful in that regard, because I know for me, when I was like going to school and whatnot, there weren't very many hawks at all, especially around the parts where I went to school too. Everybody was like either a hippie anti-interventionist or a right-wing anti-interventionist or like a Russia Today fanboy, that kind of stuff. So So that's basically that there. What are sort of the main areas, I guess, in the world that interest you, and what sort of flashpoints do you really look into and whatnot?
Well, of course, I care about what's going on over here in Ulster, but I also particularly care about possibly intervening into South Africa and helping out fight back the Chinese invasion of Africa. I think that's probably one of the main things that interests me at the moment.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I'm not that aware of what's going on currently in South Africa. And if you could kind of go over, I guess, for the audience a bit about the current situation in Ulster or Northern Ireland, that'd be probably pretty useful too, since I'm not sure how many people follow that area.
Hmm. Well, I can't. Well, I'll try my best to tell about what's going on in Africa because I don't particularly know enough information about it myself. But at the moment, it's China has been ever increasing, investing into railways and many other things. You know, because the profitable cobalt mines there, which is the South Africa is the biggest exporter of cobalt, which is in every single one of our computer and electronics. And China at the moment, with the pretty sure they're called the ANC, are
Yeah.
moving. And at the moment, from what I seen, was I saw that apparently that there was a South African Chinese police branch going on, which yeah, it's definitely worrying to see. But obviously, I can't really comment much on Africa because I don't particularly know about it too much myself. As for what's going on over here in Ulster, it's much the same, just communist parties with militia wings that have been trying to take over and trying to import Chinese businesses. It's much just the same.
Yeah, no, I mean, China's basically trying to take over the world in terms of their economic influence right now. And I'm so tired. I'm so done with people doing apologetics for them. Like, oh, but China isn't invading places. They're not going to war or anything yet. It's like, yeah, not yet. They're at the point right now where they're trying to take over the world economically. They'll start doing physical wars more often once they have the capacity to do so. They're just enriching themselves right now. And what have we seen? We've seen them build up their navy. They've acquired a lot more missiles, hypersonic stuff. They've upped their air force capability. I mean, it's only a matter of time before they start making military moves as well, and big military moves.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're just at a stage right now where they're trying to do their soft power sort of thing, but the hard power is definitely going to follow.
I mean, they recently, well, actually, it's kind of old news. It was like a year ago that they had done this, but last year they had already moved some of their newest anti-aircraft missile trucks into Zimbabwe, which is on the border of South Africa, and also Botswana. But I doubt they don't really need anti-aircraft capabilities for Botswana.
Yeah.
I mean, South Africa is, I think we do need to intervene, which is why I was a big supporter of Trump, because he was majorly into helping the farmers of South Africa step up against the Chinese government. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's very anti, you know, helping the South African farmers.
Right. On that, do you still support Trump? What do you make of Trump currently? And did you support Trump then in the 2020 election as well?
uh, well, I didn't expect Trump to get anywhere as close to winning as he did in the 2020 election. I did still support him, but more of just for the memes of it.
Okay.
But I do still support Trump. I do think that there was, in the past few days of the siege and everything, it was some really dodgy stuff going on. It over in the States. I'm not too sure what to make of it just yet, but it seems to be multiple interests that happened that day, and that it wasn't just Trump supporters, but it was some of them were definitely some malicious Trump supporters wanting to do something. Really dodgy stuff like.
Yeah, I consider what happened on the Capitol though to essentially be insurrectionary activity. I think that by and large, what they intended to do, we did a video on it yesterday on how they erected a gallows that they went in there charging and chanting. Hang Mike Pence. It was clear by all of that their intention was to murder the vice president. I at the moment support the resolution for impeachment over incitement to insurrection. But would you call it insurrectionary? And what would you say in terms of Trump's culpability in that? Do you think that he knew what the mob intended to do?
Well, from recent news that was coming out about it, because my mom and me we were both paying attention to it all night when it was happening. I would call it definitely insurrectionary. I mean, it would be kind of childish to not call it insurrectionary. But from recent news, that it happened, that the whole speech thing with Trump was happening a 40-minute walk away, and that he had actually come an hour late, and the siege had already begun an hour before he had even started speaking, which shows that it was multiple parties at play with that, and that's why I'm just sort of just waiting for all the facts to come out, because it's rather mad, you know.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. To kind of get back to foreign policy, though, what do you think should be done about China? What would be your sort of a policy with regards to Western countries on China? Do you think we should just end trade, or would you support like outright military action against them? What's your sort of viewpoint on that?
Right. Well, I do think that we should intervene into Africa because that is what they're pushing for at the moment. Because the way that China's economy actually works is that they inflate it a stupid amount by producing cheap knickknacks and then exporting it in the trillion, like the hundreds of billions of just tons of just utter garbage. But the way that we could beat China is by pushing them. I'm in favor of pushing them out of Africa, ending their cobalt supplies, which without a doubt would almost bankrupt them just by doing that. But to actually trade with them more, see if you there's a way that you can out trade someone, and if you can out trade their wee overly inflated economy and take over that market, then their economy is borderline useless at that point. Then, because the one thing that they were good at, they are no longer the top trader at that anymore, which is why I can sort of understand that big corporations would actually want to trade with China because they think that they could actually beat them in this trade war by out producing them. It's a possibly losing battle, but it's a one that we should be looking at.
Yeah, I would characterize it as I personally would characterize that as futile because it goes back to what my friends McCarthy as Machiavellian imperialist talked about, which was the idea of relative gains, that even if you both benefit from a relationship, they benefit more, and that in terms of trading with them, at the end of the day, all that you're doing is enriching them and allowing them to take that tax revenue and use it to bolster their military. And so for me, I would suggest basically cutting them off as best as possible and substituting away from them. I'd support a revival of domestic heavy manufacturing and essential goods and switching out non-essential stuff over to India, for example. But I think the problem with doing what you've kind of outlined there is that it almost views it, I think, as more of more of a like a just a competition within a market. Whereas even if you win that trade war where you're trading with them, but you're trying to outcorner them and flood their market with your own goods, that what you're doing is essentially still giving them tax revenue so that they can invest in their military. And so that's my worry with them. But do you regard China as like the biggest threat, or do you think that Russia's a bigger threat currently?
Well, I don't really view Russia as a bigger threat. I think the biggest threat that could come out of Russia is Putin's. As soon as Putin does fall out of power, then of course there's going to be a massive power vacuum, which I think is about the biggest threat. But that's like, I'd say 10 years away from even coming into possibility. But China has always been a bigger threat due to them embracing the Stalinistic way of life where everyone is just another cog in a machine and everyone just sort of acts dehumanized. This is prevalent through watching videos of their society, which is in the thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of videos of just people getting blown up in factories or being killed in the streets, and people just sort of walking past like it's just a part of everyday life. I
Right.
think that is the most worrying signs of China, is seeing those videos.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Chinese totalitarianism is something that a lot of people don't really appreciate to the proper extent. I mean, I have a lot of people who will try to tell me that communist China is somehow capitalist, that they're a free market and everything. And it's like they're anything but. Anybody who gets to be of any notoriety or success there has to basically become a servant of the Communist Party. There's no property ownership as we would conceive of it. The whole thing is to just the party as a monolith controls all of society and owns all the land. It's and of course they have their ambitions to basically take over the world. And what I'm kind of disappointed by is how we're really not doing enough in the West to treat them the same way that we would have treated the Soviet Union when they tried that, because nobody really traded with the Soviet Union, but everybody is down to trade with China, and it's really unfortunate. But what do you make of the situation with North Korea, though? Because China is obviously one of the big supporters of North Korea right now.
Yeah, I mean, my policy with North Korea has not changed very much. As I had commented on some of your videos before, when you had brought up this discussion, I think we should be sending in one of those, either an SBS team or an SAS team, but I'm thinking an SBS team would be more suited for the job, and just send them in to go into their nuclear facilities at the time, but also at the same time going to wherever their supreme leader is and assassinating them, securing the nuclear goods, and then killing the leader, and then moving in the South Korean army as soon as the news has been announced to their troops that their leader is dead. And hopefully there'll be a complete morale collapse and they'll just surrender. Don't know what China would do.
I'm very skeptical that would work, because a lot of people have said, why not just kill Kim Jong-un? I'm pretty convinced that if he were to die, say tomorrow, that whether assassinated or not, that his sister would just take over. She would basically do what he would do, except on a far worse level. Or if she's also gone, one of the generals or whatnot would take over. To me, I see any sort of action like that as basically guaranteeing that they're going to fire the nukes that they have. Because even if you were to take out their top enriching facilities, you still have to deal with them having, dozens of road mobile nuclear missiles that you don't really know the exact location of necessarily. That in my view would require a massive preemptive strike, and I don't believe that the South Korean government has the will to actually do anything about North Korea personally. But you mentioned to basically send in the South Korean army against them. Do you think that there would be a way of getting the political will together in South Korea to actually participate in that preemptively?
Well, I think the South Korean army has a majorly different view on North Korea from their main leaders. Of course, their main leaders, well, that's the same for every single army, but I would imagine that the South Korean army would be very compliant if they knew that we were able to secure their nuclear facilities and be able to tell them to put up the put up the air defenses just in case if there is one or two rogue nukes to get ready to shoot them down, and just to move in across the border to I forget what.
Oh, the DMZ.
Yeah, to take out I would imagine most North Korean soldiers would just outright surrender if they had found out that their leader had just been killed, their nukes were being secured, and basically the fight was over. I mean, I look at all these videos of how there's basically leaked videos about in North Korea where there's civilians who are living very Soviet-esque lives from the Ural Mountains where, a kid getting his arm cut off by a train track, that's normal. He's homeless, his parents have left him. And people are sort of pushing around police officers, and the police officers can't do anything about it because they haven't got the guns there. They haven't got the equipment to even police their own state. So when I think that only 2 million of their people are actually well fed, or quote unquote well fed, and that only 2 million of their people are in this personality cult versus the other 90% of their nation, which are rural, poor, starving. I imagine that outright North Koreans would surrender if they had found out the nukes were secured and their leader had died, and that this was basically it.
Yeah, I would say I disagree with that. I think that especially people that are in the military, by and large, they're very radicalized to an extent that they would continue to fight the same way that the Germans did or the Japanese were willing to do. Their political propaganda apparatus is extremely ingrained in society over there. And yeah, some people do defect, but throughout the history of North Korea, only about 1 in 1,000 North Koreans has ever actually defected from the country. So you got the other 999 people that are still there. Additionally, I don't think there's any way to secure the nukes before they launch, right? Because we're talking like half an hour to an hour between when you conduct the first sort of strike, whether it's an assassination or an assassination attempt against Kim. That's the other problem with it, is that if it fails, then he launches anyway, for sure. Those missiles are like off of the tubes at that point, and at that point you've got some missiles headed towards the United States, some headed towards U.S. bases in Japan, some headed towards bases in South Korea. I think that it would be a really tough thing to deal with at that point because U.S. ground-based interceptors only have about a 40% success rate, and the THAAD system in South Korea, it's not necessarily the most effective at taking out some of these ICBMs, especially depending on what kind of trajectory they use against them, because they're still limited. Now, it's better than the Iron Dome. It's a lot better, and it's more geared for getting at these kinds of ballistic missiles. But I bet some of them would get through. That's why I support an overwhelming strike to take out their stuff without having to rely on taking out the leader first. That's kind of my view of that. But we can move on to a different area. What do you make of what's going on with Iran lately? And what would you suggest doing about Iran? Because they're very close to getting nukes by all accounts.
Well, I'm not very well informed about what's going on in Iran because, well, I haven't been really paying much attention to it. I know I should be, but I mean, if they're trying to get nukes, I'd say Iran would we just do what we did with Iraq. Honestly, I'm just in favor of just intervening in Iran like we done with Iraq, because quite frankly, it's a very similar situation. The Russians are there. The only difference is actually we've got our allies are actually even closer to this enemy for once than it was with Iraq, so it might even be an easier job.
That's right. Yeah, no, a lot of people would say though, yeah, but wasn't the Iraq War bad? So you're a supporter of the Iraq War then, right?
Yeah, full on.
Based. What would you say to those who say that the Iraq War was bad though? Because there are a lot of brainlets out there on the internet that still think that the Iraq War was a mistake.
Well, I'd just like to say to him that with only 5 to 10% of our army capability that we used in that one war, we were able to beat them within 4 weeks. One of the top biggest militaries, or one of the quote unquote toughest militaries in the world, their dictator died pretty pathetically, and we were able to stop a possible another rogue nuclear power like North Korea within only 4 weeks. So yeah, it was about way.
4 weeks. There you go. A lot of people say, "Oh, it was a failure," but it's like every objective in the mission was completely accomplished, and in short order too. So yeah, we got a lot of propaganda out there that tries to undermine Iraq War and make people think that the Iraq War was a failure. Not because they're even so much particularly focused on Iraq. Some of them are, but mostly because they want to make people think that intervention is bad across the board, so that you don't do anything about Iran, you don't do anything about North Korea, you don't do anything in Syria, and people are waking up. People can see through that kind of BS, and it's great to be joined by people over here who get what's going on. Those were the only countries that I know off the top of my head that I kind of wanted to go over. But if there's any other sort of stuff about your view on foreign policy and interventionism that you like to go over, feel free. Like, you got the floor to kind of just share your viewpoint with the audience, and then after that we can go to question and answers.
All right. Well, I would just like to tell everyone that there is a massive another Chinese-backed front that we have to take major care of, and that is in my home country of Ireland, through Sinn Féin, the SDLP, and many other workers' unions with their armed militias in tens of thousands, who have worked previously with governments like the Iraq government and the Libya government and Palestine. If Northern Ireland were to fall to this communist-backed government, it would open up another rogue communist state in the back door of the UK and Europe. This would be, well, I don't have to really tell you how catastrophic this would be for the free world. I'd just like to say to Americans to please support intervening in such small nations like South Africa and Ireland to try and push out the communist threat, because the communist threat is real. It never went away, and if it was up to me, we could have just intervened in the 50s and backed up the southern Kuomintang front and pushed them out before it was too late. But obviously, then we're just talking about alternate history.
Yeah, no, I agree. You mentioned about like Chinese influencing unions and stuff over in Ulster. I mean, we have that kind of problem going on in Canada and whatnot right now. Probably not to the same extent, though. We're definitely infiltrated with Chinese influence in our real estate industry. I think that it's a massive problem. And do you see it as essentially getting to a point where they're like brainwashing youth to buy into their agenda? Because we see that happening in Australia and to a lesser extent in Canada right now. Or the people of Ulster generally not buying what Xi Jinping has to sell them?
Yeah, brainwashing with the Communist Party is a massive issue. I mean, I had a mate, not really a mate anymore, but he was a good friend of mine's. He became a full-on IRA supporter, and I do fear that he's probably going to join the IRA someday. He had said to me one day, he just turned around when we were just hanging out one day, and he said, you know, someday I'm just going to blow out your brains. And I mean,
Yeah.
that was one of the big things that opened up my eyes to how bad communist brainwashing is. And I do imagine it is as bad as it is over here around the world. I mean, you have over hundreds of thousands of brainwashed people. You have brainwashed kids who are taught by their parents to pick up stones and petrol bombs and throw them at the police officers or any other civilians. And they go out. There was just one case of some IRA people who went out to a UDR soldier's home and had killed him and his dog, and I think they only badly injured his wife. It might have been the opposite way around, that his wife got killed and that he got really badly injured and his dog got killed. And it just really shows the brutality of communism. And if you do at all see a workers' union or anything, don't ever contact them. They're brainwashed people. They have no moral compass, and they'll smile at you and they'll tell you, "Oh, we care about workers' rights and everything." But in reality, someday, if they do get enough power, they will just knock down your door and kill you with a machete. And that is the sad truth of communism. That is what their end goal is. They have no actual end goal. It's just chaos.
Yeah, no, I think it's disgusting. I think it's the sort of thing that, I mean, I talk about this from time to time, how I consider syndicalism to basically be the spearhead of communism, and it has been historically speaking. But what you describe in Ulster there is just, it's a very, I would say, almost, a sort of glimpse into the future of what things could be like in Canada and Australia and even the United States, is we've got communists now pushing for, these like syndicalist movements and everything, and it's just, at the end of the day, it completely undermines our what would you call it, our social fabric and whatnot. And I argue, of course, that that in general, it undermines the institution of private property as well. I think in the case of Ulster specifically, yeah, the IRA is a huge problem. We know that they've worked with Gaddafi back in the past when he was a thing, and I guess what sort of advice would you have, or what would be your sort of prescription to deal with that? Like, would you say that Western powers such as the United States or NATO at large should have a presence there to essentially root out the IRA, or do you think it's something that can be done without external intervention?
Well, I can see what's going on here in two ways. I would think that a US Air Force presence, as we did before in World War II, would majorly help. I do fully believe that if we had a US Air Force presence in Ulster, we could root out the IRA and communism out of Ireland, full stop. But I doubt it's ever going to happen. And so, what I would actually advise people, such as myself, as I said, I am a Christian survivalist. I would just advise you to go out there in the world, learn about natural herbs, try and learn your best, learn the most that you can about the wilderness and survival, and just pray to God that the US does intervene over here, because I don't see it ending well over here, honestly.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the issues with the United States in particular right now is that there is this big culture that rejects intervention anywhere, and I think that the one sort of silver lining to that sort of movement in the United States is that at least they have the pretense and the claim to be anti-communist, and perhaps that might serve to get them out of this lull of isolationism and whatnot once they realize that communists are basically trying to take over the world for China. But with that, that's about everything that I've got as far as questions asked. So we can go to the audience. If any of you watching tonight have any questions for BeyLoien, feel free to post them now. We'll give you a couple minutes, and then we'll direct those for him to respond to. I'll just look through the chat right now to see if anybody had any questions from earlier. Sean Brink, and then actually Net7's in the backstage right now. I always try to do these as a one-on-one interview to give the guests, time to kind of go over their stuff in one-on-one setting. But we can bring on Net7 after the Q&A portion for a little bit to chat with Net7 too. Got Sean Brink here, says, is there a way to use social pressures to shame people for buying bullshit Chinese goods? What do you make of that? Because that's a pretty good suggestion without having to get the government to do anything, just make it shameful to buy stuff made in China.
Yeah, we actually had a similar program like that over here in Ulster in the 50s to 30s. We had, propaganda posters out there saying to buy from Ulster and not the Republic, as at the time they were controlled by the IRA officially. So yeah, I mean that, and a program like that, just simple ads or something shaming people from buying non-American goods or something, I think that would seriously help you out a lot, because it did show positive work in Ulster and Britain back in World War II.
Well, there you go. There you go. Let's see. I'll see if we got any other questions here. Net7 says in the chat, we should have intervened during the Second World War when we had troops in Ulster and smashed the IRA for working with the Nazis. That's the other thing. IRA worked with Nazis, worked with Gaddafi. If I recall correctly, didn't they also work with the Soviet Union too? Yeah. So let's see. Hamster says, what will you do if the commies somehow win? Yeah, we'll probably be dead. I know I would be dead because I'm a vocal opponent of communism. But let's say that we're somehow still alive. What would you do?
Well, I have my own plans already prepared for if such an event happens. My family are ready for if such an event happens, because we did have to fight the communists back in the Troubles, back in Fermanagh as a community. We're ready. That's all I would say, is that we're ready for such an event.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. I mean, because that's the thing. Ultimately, yeah, if the communists did take over, I would hope that it would be like the movie Red Dawn, where, all the boys get together and just be like, yeah, we ain't having this, and just, pop some Chinese tanks and stuff. But our RDF Net 7 says better dead than red. Yeah, we got Kanzik says, question for BeyLoien. Do you support war against Germany? Because I do, lol. That one's kind of edgy. Yeah, do you support war against Germany?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the EU, working with the Republic, are trying to definitely set up a Chinese puppet state known as the European Union, quote unquote. And I think that the quickest that we can intervene, the quickest we can take out this diabolical union.
Yeah. No, that's so base, because obviously I'm against the European Union. My friend Timothy made these memes I've got on the screen right now of the EU simping for Iran and being sad that Israel killed some of their terrorists and killed Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. So obviously I want to see the EU broken up. I don't actually, just for the record, I personally don't support a war against Germany or anything. I support massive political pressure on them to get off of Russia and to stop trading with Russia and China and everything. The EU is a joke. The EU isn't just a joke in the sense that it's goofy. They're also a huge economic bloc, and one of the worries with them is that they could actually rival America. And to me, that's kind of unacceptable. But let's see. I'll see if we got any other questions here. Natalie says, I'll probably be called. Seeing as I am mentally ill, either fascism or communism is a death sentence for me. Oh yeah, no, they would purge a lot of people. Hamster says it would be hilarious to see Vosh get hung by his own communist followers. Oh yeah, no, I've said this many times before. If Vosh or his mirror image on the right, Nick Fuentes, if Nick Fuentes gets his ethno state, they're killing him right away for being an Italian Mexican. And if Vosh gets his revolution, they're killing him right away for being a liberal, degenerate, basically fat anime dude. He would not survive in a power struggle. He wouldn't do it. The new Stalin dude would have him shot like within the first week. So both of those guys, the irony is if they got their way, they'd both be dead. Whereas for yourself and myself, if we succeed, we're still alive. Like our systems and human survival are not incompatible. Whereas communism and fascism don't really tend to work out even for those supporters. So let's see. Your boy Reese says, should we intervene in the countries in Africa and Asia that the PRC has been influencing? What do you think of that? Because I know you mentioned South Africa, that you'd support an intervention in South Africa. What do you make of these other countries, though? Because they're right now trying to get involved in like Kazakhstan. Obviously, Pakistan's big. We've got Kenya is another big one right now. Djibouti's another. I mean, they're all over the place.
Well, especially for Kenya, my family has a lot of Kenyans who had fled, who are family members who have now fled to England due to the PRC's influence in Kenya. I would definitely support an intervention in Kenya, full stop, because although there are a lot of good Christian communities there who are friendly to Europeans, as such as you could call it, without getting all colonial about it, that they are now being attacked by, in the same way, people always say, oh, it's always just the whites that are being attacked, but no, it's also just normal, your average day good Christian African who's being attacked by these communists for being. I see communism and a lot of communist supporters as really spiteful people, that these people's lives are better than theirs, and so it must be their fault that their life is terrible. And so you always see all these poor people or drug dealers who go out with machetes and attack civilians just for having a nicer life than them and being more well organized, and apparently being a capitalist traitor. So yeah, definitely a supporter in pushing out any Chinese influence, in especially like places like Kazakhstan and all. Like pushing back China's in any way possible is always a good thing.
Yeah, let's see what else we got here in the chat. Billy Bong says, if I get enough super chats, I'll find Fuentes and punch him on live stream. 50K. Yeah, Kansik says Europe is not worthy of respect, seriously, except Poland. Poland is based. I agree. We had a question about France. Oh yeah, Hungary Country Ball. He was on last night. We had a debate. Says, how much you want to bet France is supporting the IRA? What would you make of that? You think that's plausible?
Well, I mean, if it was a bet, I'd put all my life savings on that, because I know I would win that full stop.
Yeah, see, that's what I talk about, where it's like with some of these allies in Western Europe, like Germany and France and stuff. I'm always like, with allies like these, who even needs enemies? Because they're always like crying when anybody does anything about Iran or Israel kills their nuclear scientists. They're always sad and upset about it. They're trading with China. They get all their stuff from Russia. Like, remind me again how these guys are supposed to be our allies. Like how is Western Europe our allies? You know, like
yeah, it's rather crazy.
Like, as far as I'm concerned, the only big allies right now in Europe are the United Kingdom and Poland, and Ukraine and Georgia, if you count them as Europe. I mean, they're Europe too.
Well, also Hungary, the Czech Republic soon, and Slovenia, and Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. I see them as really big allies as well.
I would disagree on Hungary. Hungary, their leader is a huge Putin fanboy. I
Uh,
see them as really weak on Russia, whereas the others that you listed are really anti-Russian by and large. So,
yeah, I see that.
let's see if there's anything else in the chat. Hamster says blacks are also being attacked in South Africa. It's not really a racial thing. BeyLoien says, "Sup, boys? Yeah, we're just doing an interview with BeyLoien here. Let's see, BeyLoien, do you support the idea of a Kansas union? What do you make of that? You support it?"
Um, I'm in the full support of Kanzik, as it would be an economic power able to quite easily cripple the EU's economic abilities and would really show European nations that they don't have to be a part of this European Union to be able to have a stable economy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can always have a stable economy without just only trading in Europe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's about it as far as what we'll do for questions. With that, well, that ends the interview segment specifically. We'll bring on Net7 now, though, so that we can have a bit of a chat. We'll probably go for about another 15 minutes or so. So Net7 was backstage posting resources and stuff. I appreciate that. How's it going, Net7?
I'm doing good. Good to see you, Newcomb Castley.
Yeah, no, it's good to see you. Good to see BeyLoien, and finally get to actually chat on YouTube and everything. Yeah, I think it's I think it's the sort of situation. I mean, you guys talk about the situation with the IRA a lot. I think a lot of people their kind of awareness of the IRA is that it was, they were a problem in the past and they're not really a thing anymore. But obviously, that's a delusion, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very clear delusion. I mean, and I'm really glad that BeyLoien, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name right. I keep screwing it up.
It's fine. It's just BeyLoien or just Tristan.
Okay, well, Tristan, I'm really glad that Tristan has been on YouTube and, making the videos that he has, which have been really fun and catchy ones, honoring the memory of the Royal Ulster Constabulary, and the police forces also in Ulster, Northern Ireland, who, for years essentially had faced threats from not just everyday criminals, but in particular the IRA, a really serious terrorist organization that, made, being a member of the police force in Northern Ireland one of the most dangerous police forces in the world because of how often they were trying to, kill, bomb, and maim them, and not just in their duties but at their homes. And so we tend to forget about terrorism from people in the West who look like us, because we've been drowned with this image by people like organizations like Friends of Sinn Féin in Canada and Friends of Sinn Féin in the US, who have spread this propaganda nonsense that the IRA are fighting for the freedom of the people in Northern Ireland, which is which is nothing further from the truth. The people of Ulster, for one, they didn't want to leave the United Kingdom. They wanted to stay in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay, they wanted to be with the United Kingdom. It was a fringe group of radicals who, through a mixture of murder, intimidation, violence, essentially took over certain communities and made them essentially no-go zones to the police, and essentially threatened anyone who countered their vision for a so-called United Ireland, when the people of Ulster, want to remain with the United Kingdom. So they wanted to take them into the Republic of Ireland against their wishes. And it's not like they said, okay, well, we want to have a movement. What they said was, oh, well, if you don't agree with what we want, we'll beat you up or we'll kill you. And that's essentially what they did. And they had a terrorist campaign in which so many civilians were killed and policemen. And the United States, unfortunately, is not on the good side of history. Instead of countering the IRA with the United Kingdom, our ally, we had talks here in the US and we had organizations that we allowed to get set up in the US. Even Donald Trump at one point, even met with, Jerry Adams, here in the US, you know, and there were like nice lavish dinners and stuff like that and parties. And while people like Martin McGuinness, you know, and Jerry Adams were like smiling and saying, "Oh, you know, all we want is peace," while meanwhile they were having their friends in the IRA kill and assassinate people that they were that they wanted to get rid of. So, and it's also, this issue is also very close to my heart, not just because I have, you know, English ancestry, but also because I have Colombian ancestry. Because the IRA actually, there's evidence sufficient enough to prove that they actually worked with the FARC guerrillas in Colombia. And for your viewers who don't know who FARC is a Marxist terrorist organization that was involved in a lot of killings, assassinations, and terrorist activities in Colombia, in which a lot of people lost their lives. So this issue with communism, it's global, and we have to fight it, because it's not just the Soviet Union did not, you know, when it dissolved, it didn't end communism. Communism is still here. We've seen it in the IRA, we've seen it in FARC, we're seeing it spread now in Venezuela. You know, we've seen it still in you know, still in Cuba. You know, we've seen it all across the world. And, you know, and especially it's growing and getting stronger with the CCP, who are expanding their influence. And so we have to stand up against all these, you know, communist terrorist organizations and start, you know, kicking their asses, essentially, because if we don't, they're going to kick ours.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Hungry Country Balls in there in the chat. Again, he was on yesterday. Says Margaret Thatcher was right to suppress the IRA. Yeah, no, I like Margaret Thatcher. I thought she's based.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher is a good leader. Well, is my dad's role model.
Yeah, no, a lot of people, especially around where I live, really don't like Margaret Thatcher. But then if you ask them what do they think of the IRA, freedom fighters, bro. You know, it's like that correlates. I mean, not being a fan of Thatcher, being a sympathizer with the IRA, right? So not saying that it's a 1-to-1 ratio, but there's definitely a correlation there. See, Sally Thomas is here. Hello, Billy.
Yeah, and the Margaret Thatcher didn't, you know, kill, you know, women and children with bombs. You know, it was the IRA who did that.
Yeah, but people would say, yeah, well, that's propaganda. That seven. She fought off Argentinian fascists in the Falklands War. She's a warmonger. She was a neocon ghoul. She bombed the Falklands, bro. Oh man, no, I love how triggered people are by the UK still. Like people, especially where I live. Like I live in Canada. People that I went to school with are just the old English Empire still lives rent free in their head. Basically, they're like, oh no, the Canadian government is a settler colonial state and all this kind of stuff and everything. And meanwhile, I'm here like, Rule Britannia, bro. Like that's one of the reasons I like Jay, the War Kettles. Like Jay does the Rule Britannia stuff. Like for me, I'm more of like a US exceptionalist and everything. But I also think the British Empire is kind of cool. So, you know, it's pretty ghoulish.
There's a good Canadian folk singer called Stan Rogers, and he had actually made a really brilliant song about against the whole movement that was going on in Canada and America, where nuns would go around and ask for money for the kids, but in reality, the money would go to the IRA to buy guns. And
oh man,
it's a good song. It's called "The Old House of Orange." I would recommend anyone to check that song out. Good reach in.
Well,
yeah, let me mention that let me piggyback off that point real quick. The IRA, you know, throughout the 80s, you know, and early 90s did a lot of, you know, fundraising in the United States. Now they guised it, you know, with Friends of Sinn Féin and Jerry Adams unders. Oh, we're trying to help, you know, families in, you know, Irish families in Northern Ireland and stuff like that. We're trying to help our people. But in reality, what they did with the money, and a lot of these donors were very unsuspecting, was that the money was actually going to buy guns for the IRA, to buy them weapons and bullets. So their activities in the U.S., you know, didn't, you know, were not humanitarian. Their activities were to essentially spread terrorism. And we kind of, and there were people that turned a blind eye to it, and not just and it's not like they've stopped. I mean, Friends of Sinn Féin in the U.S. has literally raised millions of dollars. We're talking millions of dollars for Sinn Féin's activities in Northern Ireland. And even though Sinn Féin is a official political party, yes, a lot of the old IRA people went into politics and essentially are influencing the institutions, and they're still in support of the new IRA, who are still committing murders, who are still committing terrorist activities, and so they're not. That hasn't changed one bit. So that there has to be a measure. There have to be laws in the U.S. and in Canada to literally stop Sinn Féin from raising millions of dollars to essentially fund terrorism.
Oh yeah, no, we've got a problem in Canada too. This is something that my friend Wyatt Claypool talks about all the time, which is that it's not just stuff like this, it's also the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Muslim Brotherhood is essentially infiltrated the highest levels of the Liberal Party of Canada, the current governing party, as well as the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Aaron O'Toole, who was just recently elected to Conservative leader, has advisors around him that are Muslim Brotherhood. Outreach to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood supports terrorism. So there needs to be something done on that. That you say, look, I mean, it's one thing to be like a casual sympathizer or something. It's another to be an actual agent of a terrorist organization conducting propaganda on their behalf and oftentimes financial fundraising for their efforts, which are inherently against our interests around the world. You know, that's true with the Muslim Brotherhood in terms of Hamas and whatnot. It's definitely true with the Sinn Féin and their sort of tentacles in the Western Hemisphere. It's true with the Communist Party these days. I mean, they set up these Confucianist study groups and stuff. It's like, pretty soon, what's next? North Korea is going to be doing that everywhere too. I know they have their little Juche study groups, but then whether that's going to become a bigger thing, because like it's not like we're going to do anything about it. I guess it's all just what, like, oh yeah, you have a right to work for terrorist organizations, bro. I guess that's the deal. So, oh man, what a mess! What a mess. Yeah, I got another question here from Kanzik. He says, do you guys think the UK will be able to expand their influence in the tech sector now that they're free of EU regulations, which are so bad, that's why the EU tech sector is non-existent? Yeah, actually, it's funny because a lot of smart, brilliant people in the UK, but they'll never have their own sort of Silicon Valley, because even though California is generally pretty stifling in terms of their government, the EU is miles ahead of them in terms of regulation and everything. So it's very hard to actually get that sort of innovation driver going. So what do you guys think? Do you think the UK can become like a tech leader?
Well, I don't know if Net7 wants to go first.
We could go to BeyLoien first because this is like the interview with you. So
all right. Well, I'm actually quite excited to see the possible future tech innovations in the UK, because as we all know, the UK had a lot to do with helping the USA in Cold War technology, especially during the space race. I think it was 1/3 and all the scientists were British. I definitely do think that us leaving the EU and us being able to use our bright minds more efficiently you'll probably see a tech boom in the UK, mostly in England, I imagine, because, well, the rest of us are being sort of left in the dirt due to the deal, and Northern Ireland being left in the EU, and Scotland just being basically bankrupted by fishing laws. But yeah, I do think that the technology boom is going to happen, and I'm looking very much forward to it.
Oh yeah, we'll go to Net7 for your thoughts.
Well, Brexit's a complicated situation, so I definitely supported the idea of Brexit simply because I think the EU was just getting too big for its britches in terms of really just not allowing, a nation member states to really make more independent decisions on their own. It was just trying to micromanage too much, in particular on the immigration issue and others. And I think it should have been offering its member states a little bit more flexibility, but it just went too stringent, and also on the economics edge. The reality is with United Kingdom, with the EU now is outside of the EU in regards to tech. It has certainly an opportunity, but I don't know if Boris Johnson can take advantage of that opportunity because, Boris Johnson's deal, Brexit deal, was essentially just a little bit different from, Theresa May's. And I think Theresa May really she really couldn't win. She was put in really in an impossible situation because she didn't support Brexit, but she tried to make it a reality. But the problem is there were people on the opposite side who wanted essentially Theresa May to cancel Brexit, and she wasn't going to do that. But then there were people on her side who were essentially saying, we want to get out of Brexit now. We don't care, damn the consequences. We don't need a deal. She was trying to essentially get a middle road to try to, make both factions somewhat happy in that they were leaving, but we're getting a reasonable deal. The problem is that essentially both sides assailed her, and essentially she got drowned out. And that's what Boris Johnson got in. I don't know how Boris Johnson's going to do. I have not been happy with his COVID response because some of the measures, he's been really, really strict on some of these COVID measures. So much more so that I'm just like, geez, it's a little extreme, don't you think? But the United Kingdom certainly has an opportunity now. The question is, can Boris Johnson take advantage of it? I don't know if he will, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, there you go. We are at the top of the hour now, so I do want to wrap this up. But before we close out, we'll go to final remarks. So we'll start with Net 7, and then we'll go to BeyLoien.
So thanks for having me on, Nuke and Castley. BeyLoien, it's been really good to talk with you and also to, help the audience understand, the issues that are going on in Ulster and the plight of the people there against, not just, Sinn Féin, but also of the new IRA. We definitely want to stand with you, and the United States and Canada and the West in general need to stand with Ulster against communism in Northern Ireland because, we can't let, these people, these communists and these, these neo-Marxists just really cause terror in not just, not just in Africa, not just, in East Asia, but also here in our nations too, in the Western nations, because the CCP is really growing and it's investing billions of dollars in Ireland. And that money is not for good purposes. It's to help control the country. And if that will happen in Ireland, it's going to happen in Ulster. And I hope that everyone here understands that, look, whatever you've heard about the IRA, they're not freedom fighters. They are terrorists. They were terrorists. And the people who are part of the new IRA, they are terrorists still. These people support Hezbollah. They support the PLO. They support Hamas. So they support FARC, some of the worst organizations in the world, murderers, kidnappers. So it's time for us to choose a side, and we need to stick on the side of our allies and our friends, the United Kingdom and the people in Ulster. So I'll close with that. Thank you, everyone. And don't forget, death to all tyrants.
There we go. Net 7, everybody. Check out his YouTube channel as well. BeyLoien is also on YouTube. Posted his channel link earlier in the chat, so you can go and check him out. So we'll go to your closing remarks. Sid, thanks for coming on.
Well, I'd just like to thank Castley for letting me come on this show because it matters a lot to get the word out. And I'd also like to thank Nat7 for just everything, and for introducing me to Castley and the Hawks. And I'd just like to say that the best thing that I could honestly recommend the average person to do, because obviously we're not all politicians, we don't have much big connections. I'd honestly recommend you to stick in this community and try help each other, learn survivalist tips, or just in case if the worst does come to happen. as it might just do, and to fully support your government in interventions and not to do silly protests like they done in the Iraq War and all those other wars. And to just, because the state is looking out for you, they aren't bloodthirsty elites who want to suck you dry of all your money. They're there to help you. So I just wish you all a good day, and thank you for having me on.
Yep. No, thanks, BeyLoien, everybody. And where can people find you if they're interested in following your work?
They can find me on Twitter. I mostly post there every single day by the same username, and you can find me on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, there you go. There you go, everybody. So thanks for coming on. And like I said, this is Hawk Talk, where we get to sit down with just people in our community and, you know, get to find out their worldview and what made them come around to our persuasion on international relations and foreign policy. And that's BeyLoien, everybody. And I do these streams every day. I also do daily premieres as well. So be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. Additionally, you can follow me over on Twitch and Facebook, and also on Minds as well, on Twitter, and the links are in the description below. If you want to support what I do, you can check out my Ko-Fi, my PayPal, as well as if you want to become a long-term supporter of the channel, you can check out my Patreon as well. We recently had $100 a month, and hence we're doing 2 videos a day now instead of 1. And the second video today will be dropping later tonight. So thank you for watching, everybody, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.